I want to start out today with a question. Is change hard? Is change hard? Yeah? Yes, no, maybe, sometimes? Or because we hear that a lot, and we say that a lot, right? That change is hard. I know that change is hard. And I know that you guys have been going through a lot of change lately, right? I mean, for one thing, with our on-again, off-again relationship with the pandemic, the war for talent that's hitting your industry in particular. How about new competitors that never used to be competitors seemingly sprouting up out of nowhere? And then on top of that, now you're trying to deal with the change of a hybrid work environment. And then how about personal changes? I mean, raise your hand if you've experienced in the last, a few years, a city change, a job change, a change in your eating habits, a change in your exercise patterns, a change in your lifestyle, change in the number of people or pets living under your roof. I mean, that's a lot of change. And yet, if change is so hard, how do we explain the fact that here you are today, living, breathing, building relationships with your colleagues, mastering new skills, learning new technologies, taking excellent care of your clients, leading your teams, even occasionally smiling and laughing? I mean, if change is so hard, how do we explain those results? Well, I think one logical explanation is that you are pretty darn good at dealing with change. In fact, I'm convinced of that. The reason I know that is because Tim offered me a bonus to tell you that. Now, the reality is, in today's world, change is to leaders what water is to fish. If you weren't pretty good at dealing with change, you would have drowned by now, right? I mean, can you think of a time in the last 10 years when you haven't been dealing with some change or another, personally or professionally, let alone organizationally, industry-wide? I've spent almost my entire career as an organizational psychologist studying change, the link between change and growth, between change and the transformation of individuals, leaders, teams, and organizations. I've probably spoken directly to or analyzed data on well over 1 million managers and thousands of teams all around the world. Personally, I've changed homes 31 times in 43 years. And what I can tell you, I've got three siblings, 2 brothers and a sister, and all 4 of us were born in different towns, graduated from different high schools. What I've concluded from all of the empirical evidence and all of my personal experience as a business owner, as a leader, as a parent, as a child who experienced, I would say, more than my fair share of change, is that change is hard only in the same way that raising kids, or running a marathon, or building a water treatment plant is hard. The fact that it requires effort does not negate the fact that most people who commit to doing it eventually succeed. Most people who decide to embrace the adventure of change end up experiencing moments of joy and satisfaction and pride of the variety that can only be found beyond the boundaries of our comfort zones. And I bet if we played back the story of your life, every single one of you in here, we would find that you have proven my point time and time and time again. I mean, think about an achievement that you're really proud of. As an engineer, as a leader, as a salesperson, maybe as a parent, a student, an athlete, a musician. Okay, you got one in mind? Now, I can almost guarantee that if we were to trace the timeline of that achievement, we would find that in almost every single one of these cases, that achievement was immediately preceded by a season of change and uncertainty, of change and transition. The year before you made All-State, you weren't even sure you were going to make the starting lineup, which is what forced you to alter your routine, which grew your skills, which led to the big achievement. That process innovation that you now enjoy in your team as the obviously right way to do things almost certainly took root during a previous season of change and uncertainty, which is what inspired somebody on your team to think differently about the way things had always been done, which is what led to the innovation, which is what catapulted you to a new level of success. So now, let's bring that to bear on the current situation. And what if all that nervous energy you've been feeling over the last 18 to 24 months, what if that occasional pit you feel in your stomach in the middle of the night, or maybe right in the middle of the workday, what if that's not a symptom of your struggles, but it's actually a sign that you are right on the cusp of your next great achievement? Not in spite of all the change and the discomfort, but precisely because of it. Do you know what transformed Isaac Newton from an undistinguished math student into one of the greatest scientists in human civilization? Was it a pay raise? Sudden influx of cash? Maybe a new whiz-bang piece of technology? Or maybe it was a blissful romance, kind of like a Shakespeare in Love sort of thing? Nope. It was an outbreak of the bubonic plague. No joke, during a plague epidemic sweeping across Europe in 1665, Newton gets sent home from university after all classes have been canceled. Does that sound familiar to anybody? And one day, he's sitting in his backyard. He sees an apple fall from a tree, and voila. Just like that, the idea that would eventually become the theory of gravity was born in that moment. And just for good measure, during that same season of epidemic, Newton also invented calculus, revolutionized the telescope, and binge-watched every season of The Office on Netflix. Never before, and never again, would Newton experience such an explosion of innovative work. And folks, that's not a coincidence. Modern neuroscience shows that strange and unexpected changes in our external environment act like an alarm clock that wakes up creative superpowers in our brains that most of us, frankly, didn't even know we had. It's like the psychological equivalent of the 100-pound mother that lifts a car to save her child, right? That's the psychology of it. See, in normal times, when things around us make sense, when things happen basically as we expect them to be, our brains operate on default mode, right? So we wake up, we eat breakfast, we take the kids to school, we go to work, we go into the office, we go to the gym, we go to the grocery store, we see friends, we take the kids to soccer practice, we follow a routine. But all of a sudden, when one morning we aren't allowed to go to the office anymore, or when our brains struggle to make sense out of how someone slurping down a bowl of bat soup halfway around the world suddenly make the old neighborhood resemble the set of a zombie apocalypse movie. Or when we start going to the grocery store feeling like Bane from The Dark Knight Rises, all of a sudden our brains shift gears from default mode to exploration mode. They shift into creative hyperspeed. And the reason why is it's basic evolution. In order for our cave-dwelling ancestors to have survived out on the savannas, every rustling in the bushes, every abnormally long dry season, every change in their external environment demanded an immediate creative response. Those who didn't give that response are not our ancestors. They didn't make the cut. You see, Newton had seen an apple from a tree hundreds of times before. I mean, he literally grew up with an apple orchard in his backyard. But it wasn't until the confusing, frustrating, frightening absurdity of a sudden plague epidemic that Newton's newly unleashed creative superpowers finally connected the dots between a falling apple and the force of gravity. What I want to tell you today is that those exact same creative superpowers that transformed Isaac Newton from a talented individual into a world-renowned leader in his field, those exact same creative superpowers have been awoken in your brain too. In yours, maybe not yours, but no, just kidding. In all of our brains, right? All the people who work for you and now have these same superpowers awoken. And so what you have to do now is simply see the falling apple. What I mean by that is, the next time you have one of those moments, maybe it's in a conversation with one of your colleagues here today. Maybe it's when you're looking over a blueprint, or you're looking at a spreadsheet and there's some number that appears a bit askew. Rather than simply shrugging your shoulders and jumping on to the next task on your to-do list, take a minute to just follow the trail of that observation. It might be nothing, but it might be a flash of inspiration, of revelation. It's going to lead you down the path to an entirely new future. For the rest of his life, Isaac Newton would refer to that season of epidemic, that year of quarantine, as his year of wonders. That's right, you heard me correctly. The exact same time period that everybody else in the world, including historians for the last 400 years, have called the Great Plague. Not just your average, ordinary, run-of-the-mill plague, but the Great Plague. Isaac Newton called his year of wonders. What if you are right in the middle of your year of wonders? Not in spite of the changes you've been going through, not in spite of the discomfort you've been feeling, but precisely because of it. What if this is the time period, 5, 10, 15 years down the road, that your future self will look back on and say, that was the season when I discovered the growth potential that I didn't even know my team members had. That was the time when I truly began transitioning from the good manager, the good engineer that I had always been, into the transformational leader I was destined to become. All those little insights that you've had over the past 18 to 24 months about, how something as simple as an occasional game night can reinvigorate the relationship you have with your family, or about how important gatherings like this are. The things that used to feel like a nuisance, now you're like, I appreciate those. I know why we do this now. I want to do this. Or about how, maybe zooming a little more and driving a little less can increase your productivity. Or about how your customers' needs and wants are evolving in all the new and exciting ways that you can meet and exceed their expectations. All those little insights that you've had, those are the seeds of future dreams that have been planted during this season of change. And do you know the way in which you're going to grow and eventually harvest those seeds this year, next year, and the years to come? The way in which you're going to step out of yesterday's shadows and start chasing tomorrow's dreams? One decision at a time.